Okay, folks, for so many reasons, we're going to do this via video. So if you find a way to just have the slideshow open, so I'll just prompt you as you are listening. Okay. So this year, this short part of this year, I have felt so much gratitude that my students are, as always, my teachers and have enriched my life so much by making sure that I never teach the same book twice, because while Hamlet or Our Town may stay the same, my students never do. I'm also so grateful for the fact that I have lived all my life through the lens of art and literature, because I've been able to see and reckon with everything that matters in life more deeply because of it. Whether it's a fragment of a lyric or a poem or a novel or a play, I feel the world singing to me its never-ending story of wisdom and truth. And what an unimaginable blessing to spend my time sharing it with you all. And yet now our time together is drawing to a close. And this point in the course always gets me thinking about the dance between what vanishes and what remains in life. When I first started teaching way back over 20 years ago, I used to go every Sunday to this row of flower markets at DuPont and Avenue Road, and I would buy fresh flowers to put on my desk in what used to be my one and only classroom just down the hallway in what it used to be called C107. Sometimes it was roses or tulips or lilacs, whatever was in season. And when I first started doing it, people would always ask me if it was for a special occasion. And it was actually. It's just that the special occasion was life. Every ordinary, extraordinary day of it. And I wanted those flowers on my desk as a fragrant and vibrant reminder to me and to my students that life is as beautiful and precious and fleeting as those blossoms. It wasn't until many years later that I ended up writing one of the school plays, and it was about a family flower shop. And in it near the end, one of the characters says, "Nothing says this too shall pass more than a flower, but in the meanwhile, boy is it beautiful." I think we're on slide 3 right now. We lost track. Let's see. Yeah, slide 3. That line captures one of my central philosophies of life that's also reflected in our text this year. The beauty and importance of something is not diminished by the fact that it is finite and will end. Perhaps on the contrary, it's more precious for that reason, because it demands our attention so that we don't miss the beauty and value of it. The interim is ours, to paraphrase Hamlet. That is equally true of flowers and moments and people. And I've come to see that among other ideas, I've always been very interested in the ephemeral and the eternal, what persists and what vanishes, and how human life is a complex interplay of these opposites. We live and then we die. We carve stone monuments to be remembered by, but we live equally in the intangible memories that we share, into which we breathe life every time we tell a story and say, "Once upon a time," or "Remember that time when," or "I'll never forget." So many stories that add up to the relationships and connections and legacies that each of us leaves behind. Which is why the first time I came across the mandala practice of Tibetan monks on a TV show, I was in awe. It seemed to me an unfathomable thing, and I'll tell you about it in a second. But it actually demonstrates the most profound understanding of the eternal ephemeral dichotomy as it relates to human life. Okay, so now we go to slide 4. So what can we learn from the sand mandala practice of Tibetan monks? So if you see here, what the monks do is they first trace out this elaborate design. Then with special tools, they distribute colored sand with meticulous patience. It takes days of focused work by many people working together to complete the mandala. And the final product is an elaborate and stunning design, all constructed from nothing but sand. And then the unimaginable conclusion. And if you see this image, it always gives me a moment of don't wreck it. After the mandala is complete, there is a sacred religious ritual in which the mandala is swept away as the sand is gathered into a small pile in the center, and all the colors just blend into gray. We, like the sand of the mandala, will return to dust one day, and the ritual reminds us of that most vividly and concretely. But we should not be disheartened by that fact. Rather, we must use the knowledge to invest more deeply and fully in everything we do, not in spite of the fact that these things are fleeting, but because they are. The mandala practice teaches the impermanence of our lives does not render them pointless. Okay, so we'll pause with the slides on that end. So shortly after that, it occurred to me that doing plays and everything that happens in the world of theater is actually a kind of Mandela practice, another way of investing in the temporary wonder of human endeavor. For years, as I was doing plays, I never knew that's what I was doing, but indeed it always was, and I can tell you that it is a great source of moral training and personal growth. The first inkling of it came via a former student, the person actually who played the stage manager in our town, and I was laboring over a play and fearing that it wasn't shaping up as I wanted, and he'd been in my plays for 3 years, but he at that point had graduated and was living in New York and going to school at the time. And we were talking about it, and he said, "But that's not what it's for." And I said, "What?" And he said, "The play, it's not for the final product, which will be great, I'm sure, but even if it wasn't, what it's for is this, the process, the way people grow and change because of doing it." Now, that is some very solid Mandela thinking. You put tons of time and energy into doing something important and beautiful, not because it will be done, but because the doing of it matters. And from that day on, I walked into rehearsals with a renewed sense of joy. And for the first time ever, and since, I wasn't nervous on opening night because I realized that my most important objective had already been achieved. And best of all, again, of course, my students are always my teachers. Because when you think about it, plays are funny things to invest in so deeply. Unlike other forms of art, like a film or a painting or a sculpture or a song that's recorded, it's there. Those things are there forever. Anyone can see it or listen to it and enjoy it exactly as it was originally created. But in the theater, it's not so. You spend weeks and months conjuring your little illusion down to the last detail. Everything matters. Getting it right matters. Every gesture and costume piece. And then people come and they sit in the dark and they cry and laugh and are enlightened and transformed. And then, whether 3 days or 3 months later, the show's over. So why do people do it? Why do they spend months designing elaborate sets and costumes and learning lines and polishing performances and investing in something that they know will blow away like dust and vanish like a dream? Because, like the Mandela practice, it reminds us, as our town does, that all human endeavor is actually that: fleeting and yet vital, impermanent and yet worth doing with all the creativity and heart we have to offer. Because although the show itself is over, what remains in the hearts and minds of the audience and the actors lives on. And so it is and should be with everything we do in life. As Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage, which is perhaps the best metaphor that exists for human life. As again from Shakespeare in Macbeth, all of life is a little play in which we strut and fret our hour upon the stage and then are heard no more. And if that's the case, then what do we do about it? How do we ascribe significance to this limited life we live? So there are four things that I suggest we do to ascribe meaning to life in the face of its temporal limitations. So the first is that we notice and enshrine, you can now go to the next slide, we notice and enshrine moments. Not just the big important ones, but also and especially the little ones. So our next slide, Snow Aldo by Kate DiCamillo, who's actually a children's author and my absolute favorite of all time. You should read all her books. Once I was in New York in Central Park, and I saw an old man in a black overcoat walking a black dog. This was springtime, and the trees were still bare, and the sky was gray and low, and it began suddenly to snow. Big fat flakes that twirled and landed on the black of the man's overcoat and the black dog's fur. The dog lifted his face and stared up at the sky. The man looked up too. "Snow, Aldo," he said to the dog, "snow." And he laughed, and the dog looked at him and wagged his tail. If I was in charge of making snow globes, this is what I would put inside. The old man in the black overcoat, the black dog, two friends with their faces turned up to the sky as if they were receiving a blessing, as if they were being blessed together by something as simple as snow in March. So DiCamillo conjures this visually arresting moment, right? The beauty of the white on black, the unexpected moment of the snow in spring and how life sort of delivers these surprises, the postures of awe, of looking up. Even the dog knows to be reverential in the face of life's mysterious moments. And I especially like her sacred language, framing it in terms of receiving a blessing, because that's exactly what these moments are. We are being blessed with the chance to accord wonder to our lives and to the world. And to miss that sacred moment is to miss a brush with something greater than ourselves. She's being both the saint and the poet here. And in the last stanza, the author suggests whimsically that if she were in charge of making snow globes, this is what she would put inside. And in a sense, we're kind of like, why? It's a scene that at first glance couldn't be more ordinary, like a guy's taking a dog for a walk. It's very literally routine. And yet if one looks closer, if one looks through the lens of art, we have this striking visual image, right? We have the unexpected moment. We have the touching communion between man and dog. We have this moment of awe. It creates what I've come to think of as a snow globe moment, right? The ones in which we owe it to the world and to our lives to pay homage with our sense of wonder, to stop and to see properly the special moments that are around us always, as Emily would beg us to do. As we walk through our lives, there are so many snow globe moments, ones worthy of being fixed under a little dome of glass, preserved and cherished and remembered. And that's one way that we take the fleeting and we make it last. The next is that we tell stories. So every artist knows that in order to build a bridge from the temporal to the eternal, one thing we do is that we tell stories. And I'm using that as a broad category to encompass all creative endeavors in which we reach out of ourselves towards others in the world. And it doesn't matter if it's a poem or a piece of advertising or a favorite anecdote about Great Uncle Larry. It's the way we sing ourselves into existence as the human race. Ever since somebody first etched a drawing on a cave wall to someone's YouTube vlog thousands of years later, they are all ways of us saying we were here. Because no matter how ordinary we think our lives are, we can all say great things have happened. So how is that possible? That takes us to the next slide if you want to have a look at Great Things Have Happened by Alden Nolan. So here's the poem. We were talking about the great things that have happened in our lifetimes, and I said, oh, I suppose the moon landing was the greatest thing that's happened in my time. But of course we were all lying. The truth is the moon landing didn't mean 1/10 as much to me as one night in 1963 when we lived in a 3-room flat in what had once been the mansion of some Victorian merchant prince. Our kitchen had been a clothes closet, I'm sure, on a street where by now nobody lived who could afford to live anywhere else. That night, the three of us, Claudine, Johnny, and me, woke up at 4:30 in the morning and ate cinnamon toast together. Is that all? I hear somebody ask. Oh, but we were silly with sleepiness, and under our windows the street cleaners were working their machines and conversing in Italian, and everything was strange without being threatening. Even the tea kettle whistled differently than in the daytime. It was like the feeling you get sometimes in a country you've never visited before, when the bread doesn't taste quite the same. The butter is a small adventure, and they put paprika on the table instead of pepper, except that nobody was in this country except the three of us, half tipsy with the wonder of being alive and wholly enveloped in love. So he starts the poem with an act of telling, right? We were talking about, and I said, he's sharing a story, doing what I mentioned earlier when someone says, remember that time when. And it's interesting that he takes time to locate the anecdote in a specific place. The apartment that he's talking about that's so special to him and his family used to be part of the mansion of some now nameless, Victorian merchant prince, but it's now all chopped up into little apartments. These big accomplishments, the language of merchant and prince gesturing as they do to money and power, all cannot be taken with him. In fact, that's not what makes the place special or worthy of remembrance, right? This is like Lord so-and-so in Hamlet in the graveyard scene. All of that achievement, and even the monumental achievement of the moon landing, which is the ultimate expression of human accomplishment beyond imagination or measure, is quickly trumped for him by the fond memory that the speaker has of his family sitting in a kitchen so small it probably used to be a clothes closet and eating cinnamon toast at 4:30 in the morning. Really? And indeed, after he shares the anecdote, someone asks the most essential question of human life. Is that all? There it is, suspended on its own in the middle of the page. It's cutting the poem right in half. It's the question that we all ask when we face the ordinary dailiness of our lives. It's the question that reverberates through all the mundaneness and the routine. Is that all? And the answer is yes and no. Because a moment like this is both nothing and everything. Again, like the man walking the dog, it's the least special and the most special moment. Much like in the Snow Aldo poem, the routines of life have been slightly disturbed. Right there, it was snow in spring. Now it's the family up in the middle of the night together. There is again moonlight in a familiar room, this time literally. It's just enough to defamiliarize the world and make it a small adventure. Just enough to make them half tipsy with the wonder of being alive, because normally we don't walk around drunk with awe at the whistling of a tea kettle or the thousands of other little moments that comprise our daily lives. They are just the fleeting occurrences that pass without notice, as we noted so many times in our town. But Nolan is making a bold statement here, much as Thornton Wilder does. These are the stories worth noticing and telling, folks. When life offers little surprises, notice them, accord them the necessary wonder, share them with others, and tell the story, because that way they do not vanish. Because not only is that all, it's more than enough. Which brings me to the last line of the poem and the segue to our next point. Part of what made this moment special and worthy of note was the fact that he shared this moment with his wife and child. It was Claudine, Johnny, and me, and the fact that they were wholly enveloped in love, because the next thing we do to anchor our existence is we build connections. So, next slide. So this poem, which I will read you in a second, I had up on my fridge when I first started teaching, and it's something that I always return to as a central sort of meaning of life guiding principle for me. And it doesn't matter if you're going into a profession like teaching or therapy where you're going to do what the poem suggests as part of your career, or if it's just how you choose to conduct yourself in your personal life. So here's the poem. If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain, meaning in vain for nothing. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain. So the point in the poem is that no kindness is too small. And throughout the poem, she repeats the word one heart, one life, one pain. As we saw in all the texts we studied this year, the world is a place full of troubles, and human life is replete with challenges and struggles. It leaves many people thinking, even if I did want to help, where does one begin? It can be disheartening. But Dickinson offers us an answer, perhaps the only answer, one at a time. No one can solve all the world's problems, but each of us can ease one pain. We can be like the characters in 13 Conversations who offer the smile and wave to a fellow human being whose suffering they took the time to notice. We can be like Mr. Webb, who offers to walk a long ways with Simon Stimson as he suffers. When we do so, our kindness casts far beyond the single moment, and the connections we build can be even life-saving, as we've seen time and again in the course. And lastly, number 4, we invest in things that matter and live a life of which we can be proud. Okay, so this is a very famous poem by Rudyard Kipling called If. It's addressed to his son, though, so at the end he will say, you'll be a man, my son, but of course the implication here is, of course, to everyone. You'll be a human, my person. Okay. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make a heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Okay, so this is just I hope over the years you return to it and look at, just as we did sort of with, the life advice Polonius gave Laertes, and these sort of little couplets, each one of these offering so much balance, so much wisdom, things that will only make sense to you more as each decade of your life passes. But really, this is the essential recipe for the truest kind of success in life, the kind that whatever else your worldly accomplishments also makes you a mensch. A person of grit and resilience, of integrity and kindness, a person who knows how to make the most out of every precious minute, a person who has emotional balance and emotional intelligence, someone who is humble yet confident, who can not only dream but make their dreams a reality. A person who understands that success can be just as dangerous as failure, and that the ultimate measure of a life is not how we behave when times are easy, but what we do when life has broken us down. To be, as Hamlet says of Horatio, one who in suffering all suffers nothing. Taped up on my desk in the staff workroom where only I can see it, I have a quotation from an educator who I admire greatly, and her name is Penny Kittle. And she writes this in a book that she writes about her teaching life. When you're teaching, you're going to see people who cut corners, who don't work as hard as they should, or just complain all the time about everything. I believe you've got to do what's right every single day of your life, even if the rest of the crowd isn't. Teaching is about honor and goodness and mercy. It really is. And no one will be watching you most of the time. You either live up to the calling of this profession or you don't. And most likely no one will ever know but you that it matters, because the kids are counting on you. I would argue that this is applicable far beyond teaching. This is just some good life advice, no matter what profession you find yourself in. No matter what you do, you should do what's right every single day, even if the rest of the crowd isn't. And no one will be watching you. And you have to live up to whatever calling you choose. And really, only you will ever know if you gave your life your 100% best. The bottom line, whatever you do, make sure that you live beautifully and with all your heart. Choose to spend your days doing something that matters, something that uses what's best in you, both to fulfill yourself and make the world better for everyone. It doesn't matter if that means that you're running a business or doing medical research or writing a play. Invest in everything you do, because anything worth doing is worth doing with all your heart. Sorry, I skipped the Penny Kittle slide, but you can go ahead and look at that if you go to the last slide now. So a few years ago, my very good friend, who some of you know, an amazing teacher, Miss Cook, gave me a beautiful frame with pictures from all my plays and the following quotation in the middle that she felt reflects how I choose to live. And I leave you with this thought, and I hope it will guide you on your way, as it has for me all the days of my life. Do everything with so much love in your heart that you would never do it any other way.